7. Eddie stood ready as the pizza truck pulled up. Roland stood even more ready inside of him. Just another version of Diana's dream, Roland thought. What was in the box? The golden bowl or the bitter snake? And just as she turns the key and puts her hand upon the lid, she hears her mother calling, "Wake up, Diana! It's time to milk!" Okay, Eddie thought. Which is it going to be, the lady or the tiger? A man with a pale, pimply face and big buck teeth looked out of the pizza truck's passenger window. It was a face Eddie knew. "Hey, Cole," Eddie said without much enthusiasm. Beyond Cole Vincent, sitting behind the wheel, was old Double Ugly, which was what Henry called Jack Andolini. But Henry never called him that to his face, Eddie thought. No, of course not. Calling Jack something like that to his face would be a wonderful way to get yourself killed. He was a huge man with a bulging caveman's forehead and Pythagoras' jaw to match. He was related to Enrico Balazar by marriage, a niece, a cousin, some fucking thing. His gigantic hands clung to the wheel of the delivery truck like the hands of a monkey clinging to a branch. Coarse sprouts of hair grew from his ears. Eddie could only see one of those ears now because Jack Andolini remained in profile, never looking around. Old Double Ugly. But not even Henry, who Eddie had to admit was not always the most perceptive guy in the world, had ever made the mistake of calling him Old Double Stupid. Colin Vincent was no more than a glorified goofer. Jack, however, had enough smarts behind that Neanderthal brow to be Balazar's #1 lieutenant. Eddie didn't like the fact that Balazar had sent a man of such importance. He didn't like it at all. "Hi, Eddie," Cole said. "Heard you had some trouble." "Nothing I couldn't handle," Eddie said. He realized he was scratching first one arm, then the other. One of the typical junkie moves he had tried so hard to keep away from while they had him in custody. He made himself stop. But Cole was smiling, and Eddie felt an urge to slam a fist all the way through that smile and out the other side. He might have done it, too, except for Jack. Jack was still staring straight ahead, a man who seemed to be thinking his own rudimentary thoughts as he observed the world in simple primary colors and elementary motions, which were all a man of such intellects, or so you'd think looking at him, could perceive. Yet Eddie thought Jack saw more in a single day than Cole Vincent would in his whole life. "Well, good," Cole said. "That's good." Silence. Cole looked at Eddie, smiling, waiting for Eddie to start the junkie shuffle again, scratching, shifting from foot to foot like a kid who needs to go to the bathroom, waiting mostly for Eddie to ask what's up, and by the way, did they just happen to have any stuff on them? Eddie only looked back at him, not scratching now, not moving at all. A faint breeze blew a ring-ding wrapper across the parking lot. The scratchy sound of its skittering passage and the wheezy thump of the pizza truck's loose valves were the only sounds. Cole's knowing grin began to falter. "Hop in, Eddie," Jack said without looking around. "Let's take a ride." "Where?" Eddie asked, knowing. "Balazar." Jack didn't look around. He flexed his hand on the wheel once. A large ring, solid gold except for the onyx stone which bulged from it like the eye of a giant insect, glittered on the third finger of his right hand as he did. "He wants to know about his goods." "I have his goods. They're safe." "Fine. Then nobody has anything to worry about," Jack Andolini said, and did not look around. "I think I want to go upstairs first," Eddie said. "I want to change my clothes, talk to Henry." "And get fixed up, don't forget that," Cole said, grinned his big yellow tooth grinned. "Except you've got nothing to fix with, little chum." "That a chum?" the gunslinger thought in Eddie's mind, and both of them shuddered a little. Cole observed the shudder and his smile widened. "Oh, here it is after all," that smile said. "The good old junkie shuffle had me worried there for a minute, Eddie." The teeth revealed by the smile's expansion were not improvement of those previously seen. "Why's that?" "Mr. Balazar thought it would be better to make sure you guys had a clean place," Jack said without looking around. He went on observing the world. An observer would have believed it impossible for such a man to observe. In case anyone showed up. People with a federal search warrant, for instance, Cole said. His face hung and leered. Now Eddie could feel Roland also wanting to drive a fist through the rotted teeth that made that grin so reprehensible, so somehow irredeemable. The unanimity of the feeling cheered him up a little. He sent in the cleaning service to wash the walls and vacuum the carpets, and he ain't going to charge you a red cent for it, Eddie. Now, you'll ask what I've got, Cole's grin said. Yeah, now you'll ask, Eddie, my boy, because you may not love the Candyman, but you sure love the candy, don't you? And now that you know Balazar's made sure your own private stash is gone. A sudden thought, both ugly and frightening, flashed through his mind. If the stash was gone... Where's Henry? He said suddenly, so harshly that Cole drew back, surprised. Jack Andolini finally turned his head. He did so slowly, as if it was an act he performed only rarely and at great personal cost. He almost expected to hear old oilless hinges creaking inside the thickness of his neck. Safe, he said, and then turned slowly his head back to its original position. Eddie stood beside the pizza truck, fighting the panic trying to rise in his mind and drown coherent thought. Suddenly the need to fix, which had been holding a bad, pretty wall, was overpowering. He had to fix. With a fix he could think, get himself under control. Quit it! Roland roared inside his head, so loud Eddie winced. And Cole, mistaking Eddie's grimace of pain and surprise for another little step in the junkie shuffle, began to grin again. Quit it! I'll be all the goddamn control you need. I don't understand. He's my brother. He's my fucking brother. Balazar's got my brother. You speak as if it was a word I'd never heard before. Do you fear for him? Yes, Christ, yes. Then do what they expect. Cry, pull, and beg. As for this fix of yours, I'm sure they expect you to. I'm sure they have it. Do all those things. Make them sure of you, and you can be sure all your fears will be justified. I don't understand what you mean. I mean, if you show a yellow gut, you will go far towards getting your precious brother killed. Is that what you want? Alright, I'll be cool. I may not sound that way, but I'll be cool. Is that what you call it? Alright, then, yes. Be cool. This isn't the way it was supposed to go down, Eddie said, speaking past Cole and directly at Jack Andolini's tufted ear. This isn't why I took care of Balazar's goods and hung on my lip while some other guy would have been puking out 5 names for every year off the plea bargain. Balazar thought your brother would be safer with him, Jack said, not looking around. He took him into protective custody. Well, good, Eddie said. You thank him for me, and you tell him that I'm back. His goods are safe, and I can take care of Henry just like Henry always took care of me. You tell him I'll have a 6-pack on ice, and when Henry walks into place, we're going to split it, and then we're gonna get in our car and come onto the town and do the deal like it was supposed to be done. Like we talked about. Balazar wants you, Eddie, Jack said. His voice was impeccable, immovable. His head did not turn. Get in the truck. Stick it where the sun don't shine, motherfucker, Eddie said, and started for the doors of his building. 8. It was a short distance, but he had gotten barely halfway when Andolini's hand clamped on his upper arm with the paralyzing force of a vice grip, his breath as hot as a bull on the back of Eddie's neck. He did all this in the time you would have thought, looking at him, it would have taken his brain to convince his hand to pull the door handle up. Eddie turned around. Be cool, Eddie, Roland whispered. Cool, Eddie responded. I could kill you for that, Andolini said. No one tells me to stick it up my ass, especially no shit-ass little junkie like you. Kill shit! Eddie screamed at him, but it would be a calculated scream, a cool scream, if you could dig that. They stood there, dark figures, in the golden horizontal light of late spring sundown, in the wasteland of housing development that is the Bronx Co-op City, and people heard the scream. and people heard the word kill, and if the other radios were on, they turned them up, and if the radios were off, they turned them on, and then turned them up, because it was better that way. Safer. Rico Balazar broke his word. I stood up for him, and he didn't stand up for me, so I tell you, stick it up your fucking ass. I tell him to stick it up his fucking ass. I tell anybody I want to stick it up their fucking ass. Andolini looked at him. His eyes were so brown the color seemed to have leaked into his corneas, turning them the yellow of old parchment. I tell President Reagan to stick it up his ass if he breaks his word to me, and fuck his fucking rectal pulp or whatever it is. The words died away in echoes on brick and concrete. A single child, his skin very black, against his white baseball shorts and high-topped sneakers, stood in the playground across the street, watching them, a basketball held loosely against his side, in the crook of his elbow. You done? Andolini asked when the last of the echoes were gone. Yes, Eddie said in a completely normal tone of voice. Okay, Andolini said. He spread his anthropoid fingers and smiled. And when he smiled, two things happened simultaneously. The first was that you saw a charm that was so surprising it had a way of leaving people defenseless. The second was that you saw how bright he really was, how dangerously bright. Now, can we start over? Eddie brushed his hand through his hair, crossed his arms briefly so he could scratch both arms at the same time, and said, I think we better because this is going nowhere. Okay, Andolini said. No one has said nothing and no one has ranked out nobody. And without turning his head or breaking the rhythm of his speech, he added, Get back into the truck, dumbwit. Cole Vincent, who had climbed cautiously out of the delivery truck through the door Andolini had left open, retreated so fast he thumped his head. He slid across the seat and slouched in his former place, rubbing it and sulking. You got to understand, the deal changed when the customs people put their arm on you, Eddie, Andolini said reasonably. Balazar is a big man. He has interests to protect, people to protect. One of those people just happens to be your brother Henry. You think that's bullshit? If you do, you better think about the way Henry is now. Henry's fine, Eddie said, but he knew better and he couldn't keep the knowing out of his voice. He heard it and knew Jack Andolini heard it too. These days Henry was always under nod, it seemed like. There were holes in his shirt from cigarette burns. He had cut the shirt out of his hand using the electric can opener on a can of Callow for Potsy, their cat. Eddie didn't know how to cut yourself with an electric can opener, but Henry had managed it. Sometimes the kitchen table would be powdery with Henry's leavings, or Eddie would find blackened curls of char in the bathroom sink. Henry, he would say, Henry, you gotta take care of this. This is getting out of hand. You're a bust walking around and waiting to happen. Yeah, okay, little brother, Henry would respond. Zero perspiration. I got it all under control. But sometimes, looking at Henry's ashy face and burned out eyes, Eddie knew Henry was never going to have anything under control again. What he wanted to say to Henry and couldn't had nothing to do with Henry getting busted or getting them both busted. What he wanted to say was, Henry, it's like looking for a room to die in. That's how it looks to me. I want you to fucking quit it. Because if you die, what did I live for? Henry isn't fine, Jack Andolini said. He needs someone to watch out for him. He needs... what's that song say? A bridge over troubled waters? That's what Henry needs. A bridge over troubled waters. Il Roche is being that bridge. Il Roche is a bridge to hell, Eddie thought. Out loud he said, That's where Henry is? At Balazar's place? Yes. I give him his goods. He gives me Henry. And your goods, Andolini said. Don't forget that. The deal goes back to normal, in other words. Right. Now tell me, you think that's really gonna happen? Come on, Jack, tell me. I want to see if you can do it with a straight face. And if you can do it with a straight face, I want to see how much your nose growls. I don't understand you, Eddie. Sure you do. Balazar thinks I've got his goods. If he thinks that, he must be stupid, and I know he's not stupid. I don't know what he thinks, Andolini said serenely. It's not my job to know what he thinks. I know you had his goods when you left the islands. He knows customs grabbed you, and then they let you go. He knows you're here, and not on your way to Riker. He knows his goods have to be somewhere. And he knows customs is still all over me like a wetsuit on a skin diver because you know it. And you sent him some kind of coded message on the truck's radio, something like, "Double cheese, hold the anchovies." Right, Jack? Jack Andolini said nothing, and looked serene. Only you were just telling him something he already knew, like connecting the dots in a picture you can already see what it is. Andolini stood in the golden sunset light that was slowly turning furnace orange and continued to look serene and continued to say nothing. He thinks they turned me. He thinks they're running me. He thinks I might be stupid enough to run. I don't exactly blame him. I mean, why not? A smackhead will do anything. You want to check if I'm wearing a wire? I know you're not, Andolini said. I've got something in the van. It's like a fuzzbuster, only it picks up short-range radio transmissions. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're running for the feds. Yeah? Yeah. So, do we get in the van and go into the city or what? Do I have a choice? No, Roland said inside his head. No, Andolini said. Eddie went back to the van. The kid with the basketball was standing across the street, his shadow now so long it was a giant tree. Get out of here, kid, Eddie said. You were never here, you never saw nothing or no one. Fuck off. The kid ran. Cole was grinning at him. Push over, champ, Eddie said. I think you ought to sit in the middle, Eddie. Push over, Eddie said again. Cole looked at him, then looked at Andolini, who did not look at him but only pulled the driver's door closed and looked serenely straight ahead, like Buddha on his day off, leaving them to work the seating arrangements out for themselves. Cole glanced back at Eddie's face and decided to push over. They headed into New York, and although the gunslinger, who could only stare wanderingly at spires even greater and more graceful, bridges that spanned a wide river like steel cobwebs, and rotted air carriages that hovered like a strange man-made insects, did not know it, the place they were headed for was the tower. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sitting down with another part of Majin reading The Drawing of the Three. The episode is slightly shorter, and so will the one be tomorrow, because I want to, make it fit. If I don't, you're either gonna have 2 shorter episodes or 1 really long one. And frankly, I think that the 1 really long one is bad. Because, at the end of the day, you want to, read this in snippets. If it's really long, then not so good. So yes, I'm gonna call it a day for today. And with that being said, see you tomorrow. Long days and pleasant nights, listener.